Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host,
Brett Gilliland.
Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, we've got Alan Stein Jr. with us. Alan, what's going on, my man?
Not much. I'm excited to chat with you and looking forward to a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Me as well. Basketball season is just got over. Had a good, exciting season here in St. Louis. I don't know if you know this or not, but obviously you do because you know the Tatum deal. But Tatum and then Keith Kachuk's son, I think it was Matthew Kachuk, they won the Stanley Cup. So those two kids grew up together, went to high school together. It's pretty cool to see in about a week's time frame when they won the NBA Finals and the Stanley Cup. So awesome stuff.
That is cool.
So, well, you are just outside of Washington, D.C., a keynote speaker, author, and coach. You're an internationally renowned basketball performance coach and has spent 15-plus years working with the highest-performing players on the planet. Name-dropping here, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Kobe Bryant. Some big names, man.
Yeah, that was kind of my previous career and my previous lifetime, and I'm so fortunate to be able to not only make a living, but build an extraordinary life around something I was so passionate about, the game of basketball. And, you know, in 2017, I pivoted away from the direct on-court training to do corporate motivational speaking and writing, but basketball is still really the foundation of everything I preach and teach, both on stage and on page, as I'm always referencing the perspectives and the disciplines and the mindsets and the strategies that I learned from those world-class players and coaches. And now I just teach folks how to apply those to business and to life. So basketball is still a major red thread in everything I do.
I love it. I love it. So before we kind of dive into all that stuff and the things that you're doing now, is you're working with, American Express, Pepsi, Starbucks, Under Armour, some amazing programs, UConn men's basketball. I mean, that guy passed up a lot of money to go to the Lakers, didn't he?
He sure did.
But give us a little feedback, man, on what made Alan Stein Jr. the man you are today.
Well, I think the fact that I was able to always do something that I love to do has played a major role, and it's something I'm incredibly grateful for. I was very fortunate that when I was in middle school, I had a very influential person in my life, a coach, that told me the secret, if you will, to success, to high performance, and to fulfillment is to find what it is that you love and find what it is that you're naturally pretty good at, and then find where those two things intersect. And wherever those two things intersect, that's your strength zone. And the more time and effort and energy you can invest in your strength zone, as I just said, the higher you'll perform, the happier you'll be, the more success you'll feel. And that's not to be confused with stepping outside of our comfort zone in order to grow and to get better. But it's a matter of just taking what you love, what you're pretty good at, and spending as much time there as possible. And it's also very important to note that point of intersection will change or can change as you get older, as you develop new interests and new talents, as you have more life experience. So even in my own journey, that point of intersection for the first 20 years of my life was as a very dedicated basketball player. And then I pivoted to a new intersection, which was being a basketball performance coach. And then, as I just mentioned previously, I pivoted again to become a corporate keynote speaker. But each one of those iterations has still had the same recipe of something I love and something I'm fairly decent at.
Yeah, I love that. I just got a video sent to me yesterday from a buddy of mine, and it talked about this guy. I can't remember where it was even at, but this guy said he hates when people say follow your passion. He says, I say, go follow your talent. So when you hear that, follow your talent versus follow your passion, what do you think about that? Let's talk about that.
I actually don't think it's either or. I think it's yes and. I think
I love that.
You need to figure out what you are passionate about, but that in and of itself is not going to be enough. You also need to find, where do some of your natural gifts and talents lie, and do they intersect? And once again, I never want to imply that there's only one point of intersection. I mean, many people have multiple passions and multiple talents. So you have a few different dots that you could choose from. But, I think most people will agree, in order to be good at anything, you've got to be willing to put in the work. Our mutual friend, Drew Hanlon, always talks about the unseen hours and the things we do when no one's watching. Well, it's been my experience that the only way you're able to put in that type of work, or at least the work that's required for sustained long periods of time, is if you actually enjoy what you're doing. If you don't, if you don't like what you're doing and you're just trying to rely on willpower to kind of muscle through it and grit and grind through it, I just don't think it's sustainable. So you got to find the things you enjoy, the things that light you up, the things that give you energy. And if they do align with things that you're also, have some natural proclivities towards, then I think that gives you the best chance to be successful.
Yeah, I agree. I think too, sometimes you don't really know that until you get in there, right? You get in the arena and find it out. Like I didn't know. I mean, I've been in wealth management for 23, 24 years. I thought this is what I wanted to do, but I didn't know. But thank God I loved it as well.
Absolutely. And one of the things I try and talk to young people about all the time, especially my own three children, is one of the best ways to narrow down what you love to do is to try some things that you don't like to do. And I've had especially in my teenage years in particular, a whole host of jobs that I tried and realized this wasn't for me, whether it was waiting tables or working retail and there's nothing wrong with either of those vocations. There's other people that love doing those things, but those things weren't things that, would light me up. So you've got to find what you love to do. And you do that by trying some things that maybe you end up not liking so much.
So let's talk about them. You talked about 3 kids. How old are your kids?
So I have twin sons that are 14 and they'll be entering ninth grade in the fall. And then I've got a 12-year-old daughter who's entering seventh grade. So they're
Okay.
right in
So
the
big.
thick of it.
Yeah. So my oldest, I've got 4 boys. Actually, my 4th boy is right over here. He came to work with Daddy after lunch today for a little bit. So
Awesome.
he's over here listening to the podcast with us. But my oldest is going to college in a few about 34 days. Not that I'm counting. So not looking forward to that. But it'll be great. That's what we got to do as parents. But talk about that. When you're on the grind, right? There's a lot of parents that listen to this, and you're on the grind. You're trying to build your business. You're trying to provide for your family. Do all those things. Like, how did you stay in the moment and stay present to be still a part of their lives?
Well, first and foremost, in the spirit of full transparency, in the past, I didn't always do a very good job of that, but
Okay.
I'm thankful that I've learned some hard lessons and I'm doing a much better job with that now. And I could honestly say that not just about parenting, but about different areas of life. And I bring that up with a huge smile and with optimism because I've figured that where I am at present is not near as important as the direction that I'm going. And I just want to make sure that in every area of my life, my physical, my mental, my emotional, and my spiritual wellness is all trending up and that I'm doing the best I can with what I have wherever I am. So there were some times where I struggled with having any type of harmony or balance when my kids were younger. And I believe that I've learned those lessons and I do a much better job today of being fully present with them than maybe I did in the past. And I'm thankful I've learned those lessons. At the same time, I've also forgiven my previous self for maybe not doing as great a job. It's that old adage that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Right.
And that's really how I try to approach everything. And for me, I don't ever try to have complete balance between personal and professional. What I aim to do is what you just said so insightfully is I aim to just be fully present with whatever I'm doing and whoever I'm with. So when I'm with my children, I do the best I can to be fully present and engaged with them. When I'm not and I'm in work mode, then I'm fully present and engaged with whatever it is that I'm working on. So I don't try to serve 2 masters at once. I try not to be with my children, yet constantly on my phone thinking about work. And at the same time, when I'm on a work trip going to speak, I do the best I can not to feel guilty that I'm not home and with my kids. So, but it's certainly a challenge. And one thing that I always tell every group that I'm in front of is with all of these different principles and strategies that I share, I'm not coming from a place of mastery on any of them. I'm thankful for the progress I'm making in these areas, and I'm constantly increasing my self-awareness of ways I can improve. But I'm certainly not a master yet, and don't know that I ever will be. But I'm enjoying the pursuit of getting better at each of these areas. And the last thing I'll say on that, because I know this was a mouthful, is I really believe as parents, the best thing that we can do is try to model the behaviors and the traits and the lifestyle that we want our children to, be able to pick up on and maybe emulate to some degree. So,
That's right.
with that being said, I'm proud of the fact that my kids get to see me do something that I love to do, have a tremendous amount of passion around, and feel like I'm making a contribution. And they know that I love what I do so much that sometimes that takes me away from, being home. That means I'm going to miss some of their games and some of their activities, but I've had open discussions with them that That's a trade that I'm willing to make in pursuit of something I love. And that my only hope for them as their father is that they each find the thing that they love as much as, what I found in my life.
Yeah. Solid. So would you agree with the statement that there is no work-life balance?
Well, it's been my experience that every word in the English language has a different connotation. And for me personally, the thought of having balance has just never been a construct that I've been able to work with well. I've always used what I would say is either work-life harmony or work-life flow, because for me
Yeah, that's good.
personally, there's nothing wrong with the word balance. And there's certainly nothing wrong if that word actually works for someone else. But for me, anytime I hear the word balance, it makes me think of equality. It makes me think that if I'm going to work 40 hours, then I also need to be with my kids for 40 hours. And I just don't know that that's logistically
Yeah.
possible. My work is very seasonal. There are certain months where I'm on the road a lot more, traveling and speaking, which means by default, during those months, I'm not home as much. I don't get as much time, with my children. Then there's other months like July and August
Right.
where things are much slower work wise, and I can invest even more time with them. So for me, I don't worry so much about having balance on a daily or weekly or even monthly level. I just want to have the harmony of when I'm with my kids, I'm being the best father I can be. When I'm with, serving clients and I'm on stage, I'm being the best speaker I can be. But if someone else listening, if balance is something that resonates with them, go for it. Another word that we often talk about is, and you even mentioned it earlier, is the grind. See, that's not a word that I really use in my vernacular because I don't consider what I do a grind. Now, I work
That's a good
really,
point.
really hard, and I put a ton into my business. I put a ton into my parenting, but I don't grind through life. Like I enjoy what I'm doing, even though I work really hard. But with that said, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the word grind. And if someone else, if it inspires them to have the, rise and grind mentality, that's fantastic. And I have lots of friends that are super high performers that resonate very strongly with grinding and with balance. They're just words that I tend to use, I used to use different definitions of.
Yeah. I like that. It's funny. It made me think to myself when you said that. I don't know why I use the word grind. I don't grind, right? I mean, because you're right. I love what I do. I love being with my family. I love, what I do from a professional standpoint. So I'm not grinding, but I do find myself saying that. So I'm gonna catch that one, and I'm gonna stop saying it like that. And I call it work-life integration because
Oh, I love
to your
that.
point, right? Like if I'm busy with work stuff, I'm not gonna have the same amount of time with my wife and kids. But at the same
Right.
time, like I'm leaving for vacation tomorrow for 10 days. It's
Awesome.
going to be zero work, right? On the balance, to your point, the scale is going to be like that, right? And so I think it's important. So I appreciate you sharing that. And so, what have you learned sitting in the quote unquote front row? I mean, from the NBA players I mentioned earlier to these companies I mentioned earlier. I mean, you're seeing the people at the top, right? The best of the best. What are you learning from them, and what are you finding? And even some of their weak spots are, but then some of the spots like this is why that guy or gal's different.
Well, one of the coolest things that I found out was that the traits that make someone a high performer on the basketball court are almost identical to the traits that make someone a high performer in the business world. Now, obviously, there's some nuanced differences because if you're a wealth manager and a wealth advisor, you don't have to have a great handle or a great jump shot. And if you're a
Right.
basketball player, you do. But the traits to actually develop those skills are very similar. And a few that pop out immediately. The first is the lesson that I learned from Kobe Bryant back in 2007 when he said that the best never get bored with the basics. And that's kind of been my foundational mantra. I mean, that's why the tagline of my business is success simplified. I'm looking to work towards mastery of a handful of fundamentals and basics instead of trying to chase everything out there and everything that's shiny. The best basketball players on the planet are the ones that work relentlessly on mastering, the fundamentals of the game. And it's the same in any vocation. So first and foremost, high performers have a respect and appreciation for the basics and the fundamentals, and they never leave them. They're always trying to level those up. Now, with that said, they still eventually graduate to being able to work on more advanced techniques. Kobe Bryant certainly had a nice arsenal of moves in his game, but he didn't skip steps to try to get there. He mastered the basic building blocks first and then would slowly level up and work up. And it's the same thing for any of us in any area of life.
Yeah, it's funny because I went to sorry, real quick. I went to spring training a number of years ago, and it was, I got to go behind the scenes with some of the guys, and it was eye-opening to me because I watched these, unbelievable players. I'm a St. Louis Cardinal guy, right? They are taking just these normal ground balls and they're bunting and they're practicing the random stuff that, my 9-year-old, 10-year-old that I coach that we do, right? But yet in the business world, sometimes we forget about trying to work on the bunt or the mundane stuff, right? And we don't do that. But you look at these guys, to your point, they work on that same thing over and over and over. And we should do that at work.
100%. Well, think about it. I mean, you'd certainly be way more well-equipped to answer this than I would, but think of the handful of fundamentals that it takes for someone to be financially free and to accumulate wealth. I mean, on some level, it starts with spend less than you make, and take that overage
Right.
and invest it wisely, but don't invest in something that's always trying to hit a grand slam. Invest in the things that will consistently give you a return. Try to automate as many of these things as you can. Make sure that you're protected with certain type of insurance and so forth. It would be a handful of financial fundamentals and basics that if someone were to follow those starting at 18 years of age and stick with them relentlessly until they were our age, they'd be financially free, regardless of how much money they make. But
Well, it's funny you say that because we call it financial pornography, right? You look at this stuff on the television and it's everything we tell people to do. It doesn't sell ads, right? It doesn't sell advertisement or clickbait because it's just, to your point, do the fundamentals and do them right.
Yes, and it is true in every business. But as we just alluded, many times the fundamentals can seem boring. They can seem mundane. They can seem monotonous. So the real talent and gift is being able to stick with the boring, is stick with the mundane, stick with the monotonous, because that's the stuff that's going to lead to success.
Yeah.
Another trait that I've noticed in both basketball and business, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, is high performers are able to masterfully blend confidence with humility. They earn the right to be confident because they've put in the work during the unseen hours, so they've earned the right because they've gotten in the reps, they've put in the work. However, what's so important is they remained humble enough to still stay open to feedback. They stay humble enough to still stay open to coaching and having someone like yourself, help them in that specific area of their life. But most importantly, they stay humble enough to know that no matter how good they are, they know they can still get better. So they're not really playing the comparison game of, hey, I'm the best player on my team, so that's good enough. They say, I might be the best player on my team, but I can still get better. I can still refine this part of my game or add this to my offensive arsenal. So they're never content or complacent. But that takes humility. It takes humility to stay open to feedback and to open to coaching. But those things aren't mutually exclusive. The highest performers have a high level of confidence mixed with a high level of humility.
Yeah. How about I call it the bounce back theory, right? The most successful people I've been around for 2 decades, they bounce back from bad news quickly, right? So again, business, sports, they're pretty much the same, like we've said. How fast did the most successful people bounce back from disappointment?
Yeah, bounce back is, I wish with all of the analytics that they keep in the NBA right now, I actually wish that was a statistic. Like I would like to see, let's say Jason Tatum, for example, since he's arguably the best player in the world right now, what percentage does he shoot after he misses a shot? Or what percentage does he shoot after he turns a ball over? What play does he make after he commits a foul? And my guess is with a player like Tatum, he does a pretty good job of bounce back. Like I bet he shoots a really high percentage after he misses a shot or turns the ball over. And that's all just a mindset. The terminology I would use back in the basketball world, but still use today in the corporate world is next play. No matter what happens, you have to move to the next play. It doesn't matter if you just turned it over or missed a shot or the referee didn't make a call. You got to quickly refocus your lens on the next play. And once again, true in the corporate world, especially for folks in sales.
Was true for my golf game too. I mean, it's funny because I've learned, I've played golf my whole life and played a little bit in college. And even now when I'm playing in a serious golf match or something at my club, it's like the most important shot is the next shot, right? It's helped me stay focused and being able to finish, right? So that next important phone call or that most important phone call is the next phone call in the business world, right?
Always. And the key is, let's just say you've got meeting after meeting lined up today. You're going to do, 3 phone calls and 3 Zoom calls with either current clients or prospective clients.
Yep.
Well, if the first 1 or 2 don't go your way, maybe you're trying to onboard someone new and at the last second they choose to go with another advisor, or something doesn't go right. Someone's in a panic because their investments are shrinking because the market's not doing great. And the first couple of calls don't go the way that you'd like. Are you dragging that negative energy into the next call? And if you truly can bounce back, you don't. It's like you wipe the slate clean. You can say to yourself honestly, the first 2 calls didn't go the way that I'd prefer, but this third call, this next call, is the only call that matters. It's the most important call, and it's completely neutral. I'm not going to drag any pessimism or negativity into this next call, even though the first 2 didn't go well. And that's no different than Jason Tatum starting the game 0 for 3 and shooting his 4th shot with the same confidence and optimism as if he had made the first 3.
That's a parenting hack too, right? If one kid's pissing you off, try not to bring it to the other 3, right? So, but I don't know if you saw this or not either, but I'm probably going to butcher the stats. But Pete Sampras gave a speech recently, and he said something about, he won 80+% of his matches, but he only won 54% of his points. Did you see that?
I didn't, but wow, that's mind blowing.
It is, isn't it? But the way I took from it, I'm anxious to hear what you think about that. So won 80+% of his matches, arguably one of the greatest tennis players ever, right? But he wins 54% of his points. And the whole point to the discussion was, if I lose a point, move on. I'm on to the next one, right? I'm on to the next one, and 54%, and he's one of the greatest ever.
Yeah, which also tells me he won the points that mattered most, which means he can only do that if he has that next play or next shot mentality, which is vital. I mean, I say next play to myself dozens of times every single day of my life. And I say it in parenting, I say it in speaking, I say it in building my business, next play.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask a question. I'll give you a couple examples of what I'm thinking about here. So for me, journaling has been critically important since July 2005. It's been doing a long time. Me, an ink pen, piece of paper, an hour and a half a week, just thinking. And the other one is reading 10 pages per day. Okay. So when you hear those 2 things, is there one thing that you can say over Alan Stein Jr.'s career, this 1 or 2 things has been the difference maker in why you're successful?
Yes, I can. And I'll share that with me. But one of the things I think is so important is making sure that everyone watching or listening needs to internalize it for themselves and figure out what works for them. So journaling has worked brilliantly for you, doesn't mean it will work for someone else. What I'm about to share has worked really well for me, but it doesn't mean that it'll work for someone else. And I think sometimes we get caught in this trap of thinking when someone, of high acclaim shares something on social media, their morning routine, that everyone should just follow that routine blindly and they'll get the same results. And it doesn't work that way. I mean,
no.
I hope everyone can realize if I followed the exact same diet and weightlifting program as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, I would still not look like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Exactly.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily equate. I'll speak in kind of broad terms. And what I'll say, for me, my own physical fitness and wellness has always been at the epicenter of my priority list and my commitment. And that's because I've always identified as being an athlete. I mean, I stopped playing competitive basketball in the late 90s when I graduated from college, and yet I still identify and treat myself as if I'm an athlete. So, I still work out most days of the week. I eat a very clean diet. I have a pretty strict regimen of what I do in the morning. And a lot of it is based on my physical wellness, because for me, I found that when I have a high level of physical wellness, it actually leads to a higher level of mental wellness, emotional wellness, and spiritual wellness. So 2 things I've done recently that have helped immensely. One is for the last probably 60 days, I've started every single day just going for a 60-minute walk. So I'm not like running mountains. I'm not training for triathlons. I am literally just walking, but I'm outside. I choose to listen to a podcast so I can either be inspired or educated at the same time, but I just go for a walk. And it has been a great way to kind of set the tone for my day. I do choose to strength train most days as well. And I've added reading back in. I'm so glad that you mentioned the 10 pages a day. because for a while, I kind of got away from reading physical books. I was still consuming a ton of content, primarily through podcasts, but I wanted to start reading. So what I've habit stacked is I go for a 60-minute walk in the morning. And when I come back while I'm making breakfast, I set my timer and I read for 25 minutes. And I've been doing that for a couple of weeks at the time of this recording, and it's been fantastic. And it's amazing how doing something a little bit each day, the cumulative and compound effect starts to add up. I mean, I'm just 25 minutes a day. I'm tearing through books now, and just walking for 60 minutes a day has been phenomenal.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you just put your mind to it. But winning that morning is so important to winning the rest of your day. Because when you set that habit and you do it, man, the day just it goes great, right? But you said it's earlier is you see somebody online, they say this, do this. It's like I think you got to be okay. And you've also mentioned this, be okay with what works for you. For me, the 5 o'clock in the morning stuff to get up and work out and do all that, I end up like in a week later, like pissed off. Like I'm pissed off at the world. Like this sucks, like, so I just don't do it. But I think you've got to learn to be okay with that. So do you have any of those things where you've had to learn to be okay with it and flush out the noise?
Absolutely. Well, you raise a really excellent point, and that is, it's kind of like the game musical chairs. You probably haven't played musical chairs for a while. I know I've played, but I'll never forget the premise. And the premise is there's a lot more people than there are chairs, which is why you get that panic attack when the music stops, because there's not a chair for everyone. Well, if you and I were to try to implement all of the things that we see on social media and all of the things that the gurus tell us we should do, whether it's drinking this or eating that or taking cold showers or being in the sauna or wearing, being like, if we were to line up all of those things, there's just simply not enough time in the day to do them all, much less enough time in a morning or an evening routine. So you've got to kind of pick and choose what works for you. So if you're choosing to journal for 15 to 20 minutes a day, that is fantastic. But that means there's not anything else you can do for that 15 to 20 minutes. If I'm choosing to go for a walk for 60 minutes, I've just taken a piece out of that pie that I'm going to dedicate towards that. So if I tried to implement everything, I wouldn't be able to do it. So it is like musical chairs. There's a finite amount of time in our morning and evening routine, and you got to decide which 2, 3, 4, 5 things are most important to you to put in the bookends of the day. And for me, there's a checklist of 3 things that I think everybody listening or watching needs to figure out about themselves so that they can operate at their highest level. This is kind of what goes into your own personal operating system. The first you just alluded to, do you prefer early mornings or do you prefer late evenings? Are you the early bird or are you the night owl? And the question is, one, which do you prefer? When do you have your best energy? When do you have your best focus? When do you do your best work? See, for me, I've known ever since I was a child, I actually operate really well in the early mornings. So from 6 to 10 a.m., 6 to 10 a.m. is when I am at my best. That is when I have my highest energy, my best focus. Now, as anyone close to me will tell you, from 6 to 10 p.m., I'm almost worthless. Like I have very low energy. I have very low focus. So I've learned to build my schedule and my day around the fact that from 6 to 10 in the morning is when I'm going to do my heavy lifting. And I say that in air quotes because sometimes it's actually lifting weights. Right. Sometimes it's creating social content. Sometimes it's working on another project, but that's when I know I'm at my best. So the first thing you have to figure out is what time of day do you operate best? And it doesn't have to be early morning or late evening. Maybe you're best mid-morning or maybe early afternoon, but find that sweet spot of when you're at your best. The second thing you need to figure out about yourself is, do you prefer a high level of structure or do you prefer more spontaneity? For me, I love structure. I love routine. If I were to show you how detailed I am in my schedule, how detailed I am in my workouts and my eating and what I do in a day, it can make some people feel very claustrophobic. It's a lot, but that's how I operate best.
Yeah.
I love going to bed at night knowing exactly to the minute what my next day is going to look like. But I understand other people, they just prefer the spontaneity. They just want to put some guardrails up and say, when I get up tomorrow, I'm going to try and do a couple of these things. And they love the freedom to figure it out in the moment. So with all of these, there is no right answer. You just got to figure out what works for you. So first has to do with, when do you operate best time of day? Second is, do you prefer a lot of structure and detail or do you prefer more spontaneity? And then the third one, which is really important, where do you derive your energy? Are you an introvert and derive your energy in solitude and stillness? Or are you an extrovert and derive your energy by being with others and they fill your bucket? For me, just sharing openly, I heavily identify as an introvert. So I love stillness. I love quiet. I love solitude. I love alone time. Now, my entire vocation hinges on me being on stage in front of large groups of people,
Right.
or being a podcast guest where I'm pouring into people. So I love people and I love sharing. I love teaching. I love, speaking, but those things drain me. So I know that in order for me to be at my best, whether it's as a guest on your show or it's to take the stage to give a keynote, I have to make sure that before that, I've got ample stillness and solitude so that I can make sure my battery is fully charged so that I have everything to give, everything to pour into to others. And then when these events are over, I've got to go back to some solitude to recharge. So if I'm supposed to be with my kids that night, I owe it to them to show up as my best self. So I need to make sure that I'm constantly balancing having alone time to recharge so that I can be my best. And if you can figure those three things out about yourself, that will allow you to really get in a groove of both effectiveness and efficiency, and this will kind of become your operating system.
Yeah. And I love that because, again, I'm in this mode now of like trying to help people understand that just because the 5 a.m. thing works for 6 a.m. works for you, it doesn't mean it's okay, right?
Of course,
Give yourself permission. It's okay. Because I beat myself up a long time, because, again, all these books and all the stuff you see out there, and I'm like, well, crap, I'm not doing that. But then once I found with and then been okay with what works for me, then it's been awesome. It's been really, really good.
And what that takes is a high level of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Self-awareness is the perfect cocktail of knowing what things you're good at, knowing your opportunities for improvement and growth, knowing what your dreams and your hopes are, but also knowing what your fears and your insecurities are.
Yeah.
It's knowing what your preferences are and knowing what things that you don't like. But it's also, with all of it, it's having an openness and a courage to try different things. But as you just said so brilliantly, giving yourself the grace and space and the self-compassion to say, I don't have to do it like someone else does. I need to get crystal clear on what I believe is most important to me. And then I need to design a life and a schedule and a work-life integration model that will allow me to best achieve that. And all that starts with even defining success for ourselves. I think many times we give our power away because we allow society to define success. And many times society defines success by kind of the external trappings of, how much do you make and what kind of car do you drive and what house do you live in and where do your kids go to school? And it's not to say those things aren't important. And it's not to say that those things can't, be something that motivates you and drives you, but that needs to be your choice. Each one of us needs to decide what winning looks like to us, get crystal clear on our core values and our standards, and then design a life that's in alignment with that.
What do you have any risks that you look back in your career and you say, man, I am so happy I took that risk, I took that jump, that leap of faith, but yet you were scared to death to do it?
Yeah. Honestly, nothing jumps to mind of something I was scared to do. Like the biggest one that comes to mind was when I decided to leave a very successful basketball training business and pivot into corporate keynote speaking. And I knew that it was a big risk. I had achieved some decent notoriety and work stability in that space, but I no longer was loving it the way I had previously. So I decided to try something else. And literally, for someone that has never worked a corporate job in his entire life, I decided to anoint myself a keynote speaker to speak to corporations. So I knew that was a big risk, and it gave me a level of excitement, though. It didn't scare me. I felt that I had the recipe of what I needed to build a successful speaking business. And a lot of that hinges on the stuff we've already talked about. Like I knew that when I went into the speaking world, I'd be starting as a rookie, and I had to start laying that foundation and working on the fundamentals that, nobody, unless you are famous, which I'm certainly not, nobody builds a successful speaking business in 1 year or 2 years or even 3 or 4 years. Like it takes time. And I'm okay with that. And I heard this on a podcast. I believe it was on my walk this morning. And I don't remember who the original person was, or I'd give them attribution, but it said, be very ambitious in your goals, but very patient in the pursuit. And I love that. It's like, hey, aim really high, but just know it's going to take a little while to get there and be okay with that. So I
Yeah,
can't
that's
think of a
solid.
time where I was super scared to try something, but plenty of times where I've been really excited.
Yeah. But I mean, think about that and talk more about that betting on yourself, though. I mean, you certainly have bet on yourself. So how important is that?
Yes, and I've bet on myself my entire, adult professional career. Because even when I was in the basketball training space, I never worked specifically for a team or an organization. I was always self-employed. I had my own training companies and my own clients, and I got to be a part of some really good teams because they were
Mm.
clients of mine. But I've always bet on myself, and that's another thing that I figured out. I operate best in a vocation that's, I guess you'd say, 100% commission based. I mean, the day I stop speaking is the day I stop making money. So that
Right.
motivates me and keeps me inspired. Whereas other people, they operate better being a part of a bigger team and knowing that they have the stability of a salary and a 401k. And that's fantastic. So once again, I hope the through line to all of this and the main theme of all of this is there is no one size fits all. It's one size fits one. And that's what each of us needs to be figuring out is where do I operate best? I know some folks that if they were completely self-employed like I am, they wouldn't be able to sleep at night. They'd be paralyzed with fear. So that's not a good fit for them. And that's okay. Even in the basketball space, I met some brilliant coaches who readily acknowledged that they worked best as an assistant coach. They had no desire to be a head coach. And they were brilliant basketball minds.
Yeah.
They could have been a head coach, but they knew that wasn't where they would operate best. So for all of these things, we should just be trying to figure out our own operating system and what works best for us. And that takes trial and error. And it certainly takes time. I mean, I'm knocking on the door of being 50 years old. Thankfully, I only consider that the halftime of my life. I plan to live to 100, and I plan to do the next 50 better than I did the first 50. But I'm still trying to figure all of this stuff out.
Yeah. It's funny. So my goal in life is to play golf on my 100th birthday with my friends, my boys, my wife, and I want to break 100. I want to break 100 on my 100th birthday. You in? You
That's
gonna come with me? Well, I'm 46. How old are you?
I'm 48. I'll be 49 in
Okay.
January.
So you'll have
Yeah,
to be 102. I'll invite you. You'll be 102 and come to my 100th birthday party. We'll play some
that
golf.
sounds good. I'll caddy for you.
Awesome. Think about that point in your career, like when you get bad news. Right now, we talk about the circuits of success. We're always talking about the good stuff, but there's also the bad stuff, right? The bad crap that happens in our lives every day. How do you, when you get bad news, how do you pick yourself up off the ground, put your work boots on, and get back at it in a timely manner?
Well, the first thing I do is I give myself the grace and space to be human, and I allow myself to feel bad. I allow myself to feel whatever emotion I'm feeling. Sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's disappointment, sometimes it's frustration, sometimes it's jealousy. And for me in the speaking world, I get bad news all of the time, and it usually comes in the form of, Alan, you weren't the right fit for this event. We're going to hire somebody else. And again, it's not catastrophic news, but for someone who makes his living speaking for others, every single time that they hire someone else and they don't hire me, it's a little rib shot. And so the first thing I do is I give myself 24 hours to just feel however I'm going to feel. I don't suppress it. I don't resist it. I don't ignore it. I don't ball it up. I just remind myself that it is okay to be frustrated, irritated, disappointed, jealous, annoyed, angry, whatever. And part of that because my philosophy is that emotions aren't good or bad. They only become good or bad when we attach a label to them. Emotions by design are 100% neutral. Like I said, they only become good or bad if that's the label we choose to attach. Every emotion exists for a reason. So I try not to look at it as, that these are bad emotions that I'm feeling. Emotions are designed to inform us. They're not designed to direct us. So with that being said, it's important to note that I give myself permission to feel bad for 24 hours, but I don't allow myself to treat others poorly or to be rude or to be disrespectful or fire off a mean email because someone didn't choose me for a speaking engagement. That would be completely inappropriate and certainly unprofessional. So for me, I allow myself to feel however I want to feel, but I have a very high standard of excellence on how I behave. And the funny thing is, even though I give myself 24 hours to feel that way, it usually dissipates now in 1 or 2 hours. And that is because the next part of that, which we've already talked about, is then I just move to the next play. I just say, hey, you didn't get the speaking engagement. whining and crying and blaming and,
Yep.
defending and making excuses isn't going to change that. So let's just untether from it, let go, and let's try and move on to the next play. And that's certainly been a very helpful mindset.
I love that. So what, I see the books in the background there. So talk to us about are those your books? I can't see
They are, yes. So
let's
Raise
plug
Your
them,
Game,
man.
yeah, Raise Your Game was my first book, and that came out in 2019. And it's high performance secrets from the best of the best. So I took everything that I learned from the basketball world and have outlined that very clearly in a way that folks can apply it to any area of life. And then I decided to write a follow-up book a couple years later called Sustain Your Game. So Raise Your Game is designed to show folks what they need to do to climb that proverbial mountain. Sustain Your Game shows you how you can stay there with a high level of excellence for a sustained period of time, but most importantly, still enjoy what it is that you're doing.
Yeah. That's the key right there, right? Like, why have all that success and then you hate life? So, I got to ask you got any questions you want to ask over here? Nothing? No? He's ready to go golf. That's what he wants to go do.
I think so. That's okay. I hope you guys get a chance to get out there and do that today.
I hope so too. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So where do our listeners find more of you, Alan?
Well, the easiest thing is my website. That's the hub of everything I do. And that's just alansteinjr.com. And that'll have an overview of all of my programs and all of the things that I offer. I'm also very easily found and accessible and responsive on social media. I'm at Alan Stein Jr. on Instagram, on X, and on LinkedIn. So folks can just shoot me a DM. I'm really good about getting back to folks on there. And then, yeah, if you have an interest in either book, you can find them on Amazon or Audible or wherever you get your books and audiobooks.
Awesome. We'll put all that stuff in the show notes, man. It's been awesome having you. Appreciate it. Love your energy and appreciate all you're doing out there in the world, man.
Thank you. Likewise. This was a lot of fun.